Welcome to Moving into Wholeness. I'm Carly Wood. This is an evolving space for sharing stories to inspire and connect, practices to guide and heal, in hopes of supporting you as we all journey into wholeness together. Okay, welcome to another episode of Moving into Wholeness. I'm Carly Wood. Today, I'm excited about my guest, Jacob Cooper. He holds a master's degree, is a licensed clinical social worker, a certified hypnotherapist, and Reiki master. He specializes in past life regression hypnotherapy. He has a book out called Life After Breath that talks about his near-death experience, and I'm super excited to hound him with questions about that and all of the other good stuff. So welcome, Jacob.
Thank you, Carly. A true honor to be your guest here today. I'm so glad we were able to make this work out.
Me too. So I'm just going to jump right in. Death is super scary for most of us because we identify with our bodies, with our stuff, our loved ones. You know, that's what we think of as ourselves, but really we're the consciousness witnessing all of these things and living in this vessel for the time being. So having been through a near-death experience, you've so much to share with the rest of us. You've sort of got a peek that most people don't get to have. And I want to open with a double question. One, for those who don't know you, can you just give us a summary about yourself and what you do? And two, we're going to talk about the near-death experience.
Sure. A bit about me. I know a lot of people know me as the near-death experience guy, and certainly I have had that, and we'll get into that. But I do a lot of different stuff. I do psychotherapy, mindfulness, hypnosis, Reiki, past life regression, and writing has been a new passion of mine. And Life After Breath has become a bestseller and reached a lot of people. And I'm working on my second book, and it's almost completely edited, and that's called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. So, to me, getting our message out, getting the meaning from some of this transformation, to me invigorates a lot of hope in life, every day. Yeah, I know yes, death is something interesting because I know as a therapist, that and public speaking are probably the two biggest fears that people could have. And I do both pretty regularly in running workshops. And as a therapist, that's called exposure therapy, where you can't, you could have a near-death experience, but I wouldn't, endorse self-induced near-death experience to expose oneself. But I think gradual exposure of talking about death, is great for people, to find meaning and have a different interpretation of it. And as you said before, if you're able to see yourself more than a body, then there's more, that could continue on, because just because the body is under the ground doesn't mean that we don't continue or, and so seeing yourself as more than a body would lead itself to seeing that we could go on past this body. But I mean, for myself, in a way, I had to lose myself in order to find myself. I had to lose what I was holding on to as identity, and that wasn't obviously functioning my near-death experience. I have a whole new identity. I had, my NDE, which I, talk about in Life After Breath at the age of 3 years old, which is incredible for a lot of people listening to how that's possible to remember. I know we'll get into that, but I had mine in a playground, as a child, going up onto a ladder onto a slide, which is so much symbology right then and there. And that parlays itself to my second book with really the lessons of the NDE and the symbology of it. It just looked like it was scripted by Hollywood. It just seems too good to be true. And I'm my own biggest skeptic with it. But I had something called whooping cough, which is for infants or children left untreated or, unvaccinated could lead to fatalities and death and suffocation. The generic term is whooping cough. I mean, is pertussis rather. And so I had this and I suffocated. But, after suffocation, I had, no breath, no nothing, but I was able to let go of my own pain and turmoil and torture of suffocation to surrender to the breath of eternity, which is what we all have inside of us. And we'll get into a bit of that. But from letting go and surrendering to this greater light, to this greater breath of who I was and forever connected to, everything opened up. From awareness to spirit guides, angels, soul's purpose, the source of all that there ever is and ever was. Some could call that different terminology, but it was profound. It was foreign yet quite familiar. Foreign to my experience as a 3-year-old, living on this earth, yet familiar as it was the home of my own soul. And so it was very, very much life-changing and profound, this experience.
So Jacob, when it first happened, I imagine initially it was terrifying because not being able to breathe is, as a chronic asthma, as a child, I remember that being really, really scary. So if you're in that place of real fear, then how did you transition from that to this other experience? Like, what was the physical experience? Did you just suddenly find yourself in blackness, or what were you seeing?
I was purely suffocated. And so when I was suffocated, I was just aware that every part of my body just shut down, as if you go into a power breaker in a home and shut off all the lights. Like, it was just out of my control what was happening to me in my own body. And then, kind of like a car that's not working, you wouldn't just stay in the car and try to rev up your engine. You would go outside the car, pop the hood, and see like what's going on. And so I was aware of myself kind of being able to leave this in a way. But then the last thing that I just was able to remember was my own brain, and how, due to the deprivation of the oxygen, I could feel my brain, just kind of closing in on me. The moments later, my brain literally snapped in half, and then that's when I really surrendered, to this light. And so my brain literally cracked open, and that's when God came in. There's a saying, but that literally happened to me, where I had to have my brain literally snap in half for God and spirit to come in. And I learned so much of that, but how pivotal the brain is within our journey. And that's led me to the work of psychotherapy, mindfulness, hypnosis, to be able to use our brain, not allow our brains to use us, and to be the brain to be a great ally, not a great divider of spirit and wisdom and source.
Yeah, absolutely. And so can you share with us what the visual experience was? I mean, do you, as an adult, because that's a long time ago, do you have like a visual memory of what you were seeing? And when you said there was familiar, did it take a while, or did that familiarity kick in straight away after?
It took some time, and it was incredibly overwhelming. It was an adjustment. It was an incubation period.
Okay.
A part of me was looking at this, with the knowing that I remember this, but then there was an adjustment, and there was another part of me that was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Am I imagining this? Like, what is going on? What am I going to tell my classmates, my family? Like, I can't believe I forgot about all this kind of thing. So there was an incubation period, an adjustment period. But once I was able to get out and fully go into my own soul and let go of my, kind of my own 3-year-old consciousness, was when I was able to really see this and know this clearly. So it was just by allowing myself to just kind of let go into the depths of my own water. I was able to get out of the shallow parts of my viewpoints that still, held on to, my own 3-year-old self. And then after that, I was able to really get into the bedrock of my own inner being, past, the experience that I was having as a soul, as a 3-year-old. But everything that I saw is crystal clear. I still remember it to this day as if it was yesterday. And I'm my own biggest skeptic. I mean, I get skeptics all the time for my book and on YouTube, but I'm my own biggest skeptic to the point where in my own head, I'm like, this can't be that I was 3 years old. And like, I would do interviews. I would say I was 4, I was 5. And for the first time a couple years ago, I sat down with my parents because I didn't think it was possible to have this experience that young. I knew I was in preschool, but then like a part of me was in denial that I was 3. I thought maybe 4, maybe 5. And so I sat down with my mother and she said, no, this was 3 years old. And that just floored me because
Yeah.
it felt like a second ago, but it also, just felt like, how could this be that I remember this, from that long ago and I have such crystal clear memory of it. But that parlays itself to trauma, and trauma could be very powerful, and I always say for something like September 11th, we don't remember what we were doing 9/15, 9/16, but we are certainly sure what we were doing on 9/11, and so, and this experience was outside of my own brain. It was a consciousness beyond linear development and linear trajectory. This is a non-linear, experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, was there any other beings? Was there anyone else there for that experience, or were you alone?
Well, first of all, I have this one of these chapters in my next book with being alone. I think I always say the soul is not soul. It's not alone. It's not, it's always interconnected. You could feel that way, but it doesn't reflect, the honest truth. And this experience really told me, that could be a subjective experience, but it's not reflective of the beauty all around us. And so I had awareness of an infinite amount of angels that I was greeted by, and they were literally right in front of me, right on top of this earth. Their feet weren't touching the ground, but they were right here. And then I was aware of my own spirit guides. I was aware of, just so much spiritual awareness, soul family members, previous lifetimes that I lived. But the angels were so crystal clear. They were literally, they're right here all around us, as if you just take a dial, you just turn it up a little bit, and they're floating all over this place in this reality. We don't always see it, but sometimes we can feel it.
And so, how do you define like the angels that you're seeing from
Spirit guides.
yes, or whatever, yes, or
Yeah, that's a great question, Carly. I would say if you're familiar with micro and macro, micro is more personal. And I think the guides to me were more of a personal contract. They were more invested in me. Whereas the angels, yes, they were aware of me, but they were more invested in the macro and the collective. And the spirit guides had a lot more grounding to them. They were a lot more grounded in their presentation. They were incredibly beautiful. I mean, their colors and vibrations and just feelings that I had were so otherworldly that there's nothing to compare it to. But yet there was more of a human relatability to my spirit guides, where the angels were just pure unconditional love, and they were very uniformal in their presentation that I saw. And these were very, juvenile, infant, like looking angels that I saw. And they're in a golden kind of color, yeah. And they weren't like looking at me, they were just looking straight ahead. And they were just like, they almost seemed like a robot factory of angels that were exactly the same. They were just endless, of them, but they were just floating peacefully, sending love. And they had no concept of like identity other than love itself. There was nothing separating them and unconditional love themselves. And to me, that's the closest way I could describe, God is to me. God is love.
yeah. And so it sounds like you were just totally feeling the experience. So you were feeling and experiencing that love, and how you defined, spirit guides from angels. That was a sense, that was a feeling that you had. Did I hear that correctly?
It was a feeling, but I was also able to hear sounds as well and vibrational frequencies, and And even when you see color, like color isn't just seen, like color is heard, like, it's different there. There's an energy to a color. It's not just, here one dimensional, you see a color and that's it. Behind a color is a whole story to it, so it was so vast and deep. But no, it just was so profound. And so many people ask me, how do you remember this? And I just say, how could I ever forget? How could I ever forget who I am, where I come from, and what I'm connected to? We can never do that. Near-death experience or not, we might not be conscious of it in the moment, but in the depths of our own inner beings, we remember. And that's why you're seeing more and more people coming to listen to these channels and talks, because there's a part of what we're discussing that hits a chord of truth within themselves. Otherwise, we'd be talking to ourselves the whole time. No one would want to listen if there's not a kernel of truth in what we're saying that reflects, what viewers know.
Yeah, absolutely. And how has it changed for you? As you've grown older, have you gotten more out of the experience or had realizations about it that 3-year-old boy didn't get, or was it all there for you then and you've just held it the same as you've grown into a man? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, words are our greatest superpower. And so as I got older, my outer vocabulary, improved. And so I was able to articulate it more effectively, as I get older. It doesn't change what happened on inner basis. It doesn't change the series of events, but allows myself to kind of ground it a bit more. And when I was young, I mean, I kept this inside of me for almost 2 decades. Reason being is, common to many children and infant near-death experiencers, I didn't have the outer vocabulary to process this. It was so overwhelming and so beyond anything of this earth that I kept it so close to me because it was so sacred.
I can imagine.
Adult near-death experiencers are a little bit different. It's like sometimes they'll have this and immediately, not always, they'll just come out of their bed like their bed's on fire and tell the world about it. And some kids are like that too, but more times than not, kids tend to kind of hold a lot in. And just because it's not spoken or it's not said doesn't mean on another level that it's not known. I think we have an inner awareness and then an outer portrayal of that,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so has that influenced, that experience, of course, has had a massive influence on you, but is that what has led into all the work you do now?
It had to have been one of the biggest factors in what I do.
Yeah.
I think the near-death experience came at a time when I was experiencing the most traumatic event that one could have when you lose all control of your humanity and what makes you, a human, the breath, and losing control of that. And when I was going through that, I was just in this endless abyss of suffering. And what saved me was letting go and surrendering to what never left me. And I understood that once I couldn't die, that there could only be life. Once you know that you can't die, you know you can only live. But the sad part of that is that there are people who are alive and not really alive. So I think we talk about death when the body goes, but death could be something that happens to us on an emotional basis, psychological or spiritual. So I was very motivated to give back what I was given and just see how miraculous this life is, that it's not a random experience here to kind of pay the bills, do the 9 to 5 and, build up to your 401ks in retirement, that there was something much more, than this. And we are truly spiritual beings having this human experience. And my goal is really to infuse life for people who lost touch of that.
And so, of course, there's several religions and, Buddhism, to name just one, that do practice this meditations on death for the exact same reason that you mentioned earlier. And for what you're saying now is, to prevent that not living, and it's interesting when you said as soon as you let go, that you were in this torture, and then as soon as you let go, you went into the other place. And I guess what's just coming up for me as you're saying that is that, yeah, that's sort of the same thing, isn't it? That's what that practice is about, that so many different spiritual practices offer, is when rather than pushing against it, like the fear of death that so many of us have, and we push it away, and what you resist persists, and it's that pushing and pushing and not wanting to hear stories and not wanting to, but then when you just allow it in as part of yourself, you become more whole, and you actually live more when you're kind of welcoming the full experience. Yeah.
Radical acceptance is very powerful, and that's hard to do. But avoidance, is a very big problem, and it actually accelerates, comorbid conditions to accelerate. And so I think really, I think there was a quote that where your greatest fear is in darkness, lies kind of like your greatest light, And so I know I'm living proof of that, for many, like the greatest dark that we fear, beyond that is our greatest truth and our greatest opening of the light. And so not be afraid to go there, and this could be catalysts of transformations. It's not the only way. You don't have to suffer, like I did. You don't have to wait until your deathbed to see realization. I think there is life after breath, but there's also an incredible life within the breath too.
Yeah.
And breath is life, in the body or outside of it, it goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm really curious about this past life regression that you do. How does that work? Like if someone comes to you and they're like, I want to do past life regression,
Right.
how does it work?
Well, it's a form of hypnotherapy. And, there's forms of hypnotherapy that do something called age regression, for instance. Like, let's say clients come to me, they're trying to lose weight. They have fixated events that might have happened earlier in life that hold on to, these memories that they might not be aware of, that have informed, an identity, impacting cellular memory, impacting how they view themselves. And that thought is stopping them, from, being where they want to go. They have active goals consciously, but subconsciously they have an identity, or a trauma that have happened that might have influenced, their subconscious patterns. If we feel that we are a soul, if you know that you are a soul just beyond this body, that would lead itself to be able to have access to subconscious memories included in this body, but beyond it as well. And so past life regression, really recognizes a subconscious as not something limited to just this lifetime, but that, you could go through this lifetime, enter different memories of other incarnations. And, with my sessions, it's profound because yes, I do past life regression, but I also utilize my near-death experience in my hypnosis sessions. I take clients, in between lives, when they were on the other side and maybe some of their memories, and, incorporate a lot of, mystical beings that I encountered in my near-death experience, which not all past life regressionists do. And we include, guides and, people connecting to their own soul family members to help them, to be with them during the regression. So it's, I try to have like a mystical twist based off of my own direct experience within my, clients.
Yeah. And so do you bring in because there's this obviously widely held notion in the world that the notion of karma, and that has a lot of different definitions, but in the sense that, if in the same way that there's generational trauma, there could be trauma you're carrying from a previous life, or, some kind of karma. Do you work within that framework of, freeing someone up that is the thing that if they can't, if they're having this issue and there's not like, okay, let's say, all right, I distrust all men. That's not true. This is just an example.
Yeah.
But there's no real evidence of why that person would hold that belief from their own life. Would that then be a lead into doing a past life session and try to get to that?
Yeah, I think within hypnosis, there's a point of origin behind the root of belief, in some of the things that are governing our lives. So, it's a matter of surrendering. I think we're given within hypnosis sessions the information that we're meant to hear. And as we further delve into it, if a person is meant to reframe that ideology and to kind of see where, that kind of thought based from, I think if we could go to the point of it, we could move the needle to progress it. But it's so versatile, and it works on a cellular level. For instance, a lot of clients have unexplained, health issues, that are not explained at all by any doctor within this lifetime. And plenty of times they'll go into a regression, they'll be able to see that they're carrying, a memory or two from another lifetime that's influencing the body and its cellular memory. They're able to understand the point of it and understand that was then, this is now, and they're able to shift their whole subconscious patterns and let go. But when we let go, our energy and life could grow. We're holding on to, this paralysis like I experienced in my MD. And so within hypnosis, it's really about the brain, because I know the brain, like I said, is the filter between the two worlds. In hypnosis, we do pre-hypnotic induction, which really allows the brain and the body to get into deeper hypnoidal states so that we could really allow our mind to open, kind of like a parachute only works unless it's open, to really, just access some of this higher information. It's kind of like being on Wi-Fi and accessing internet. You need to be connected for it to kind of work.
Yeah, I like that. Yes. Okay, beautiful. In your experience with doing these past life regressions, are people sort of having multiple previous lives?
Yeah, I mean, some of my clients, I could like snap my fingers, and they've done it before, so it's almost for them just kind of comforting to have someone with them.
Yeah.
Some of my clients, we have to do a little bit more pulling. Some, get stuck and have nothing, and that's not personal. I mean, for instance, the great Dr. Brian Weiss, like, the founder of past life regression therapy, will do a group regression, and he'll ask how many of you were regressed, and maybe 40 to 50% will raise their hands. And, that's not to do with anything with him. He's, the most influential, most known, past life regression practitioner, but it really has to do with the subject's ability to let go and to get into deeper hypnoidal states, and just their power of the ability to follow suggestions and to trust. We have to get over a lot of cultural myths, though, with hypnosis, that it's something disempowering and, mind controlling. It's totally antithetical to that. It's mind opening and very empowering, where we're able to really use our brain and our mind, not the other way around.
Yeah. My experience of it, as a child of my generation, I remember my father, like, must have been 30, 40, oh, I'm not that old, 30 years ago, when I was very young.
I'll take it. I'm around that age, so thank you.
Doing it to, and successfully stop smoking, and that was a long time ago. So I know there's also been huge advances in all these things since then. But yeah, I find it fascinating. And again, I just want to bring it back to the place of what you said, that it's the requirement for it to be successful is that element of surrender, which I keep coming back to in this conversation in all aspects, where that we keep coming back to that, necessity to surrender to get to the gift on the other side of the trauma, or, which was your experience with the NDR, but is also what we're talking about in all these things. In the meditations on death, it's about embracing embracing all that's there and stop resisting, and that's when things open up. So yeah, just
Yeah, it works against a lot of cultural myth in our society, no struggle, no swag, and no pain, no gain kind of thing. And that, really, so many people are traveling thousands of miles outside themselves and muscling, their way into truth, into awareness. And that could be found there, but it could also be found by simply turning inward and opening that door up, and the answers, in the truth really lie within. And I think the vantage point that we're facing in our lives can really alter the trajectory of it. But I think our society, we're taught that we're inadequate, that in order to be something, we need to do something or learn something that, we don't need, and I think the only thing that we need to do is just to be, and to be connected to our true essence and live from that place. And if we're doing that, we could live from the God lens and look up at life through a very deep, loving, true, wise position. Uh, but yeah, it's very antithetical to our culture, what we were brought up with in, many, not all, but certainly where I am in the US, it's like that.
yeah, and thank goodness culturally we're going through such a massive shift right now. So that's really an exciting time to be alive and witness that, although super messy and scary as we move through the changes. But yes, agreed. So you talk about the spirit guides, and I'm curious, do you still have connection with your spirit guides? Are they the same? And do you, work with them in your work at all?
I do, but I would say is, they are not able to see them or connect to them as deeply in my NDE. I in my NDE was full blown right around me, all undeniable. There was no, like, it was like right there. And now, I'm in my body and I have my own doubts. I'm like, so they come to me in different ways, on a kind of a different level, but I just know even more so that they're there. If it's all there in front of you, like, where's the test? What's the point of being human? If we're still able to overcome some of our doubts and see this light, I mean, wow, we're really growing, and evolving and trusting, the unseen forces versus some of our own limitations. We're trusting an infinite versus finite, thinking. So I think what I'm learning is how to trust, and how to trust that's what's inside of me and around me is infinitely greater than challenges in front of me. And it's about relearning, because our society, and I am not immune to this. Growing up, we've been more susceptible to trust in regurgitation versus imagination. And if it's not in front of us, then it's not inside of us, kind of thing. So, I'm retraining myself to kind of get back there, but it takes time. But I do connect to them, and definitely my writing, in the work that I do as a therapist and stuff like that. It's like at times, there's just an undeniable connection that's there that I still feel.
That's nice. That must be so comforting. Yeah. And I hear you on the trust. Man, that's a tough one, isn't it? I certainly, yeah, learning to just trust the most of, and because most of who we are and most of what's going on isn't seen. And yeah, there's just such a big leap of trust, faith required there. Okay, so the question I ask every guest is, do you have a daily non-negotiable self-care routine that keeps you balanced and happy and
Mhm. Yes, I do a mantra that I've been doing recently by the late, if you're familiar with him, Thich Nhat Hanh, who, transitioned. Um, and so I connect to him very closely. And it really kind of ties into my near-death experience. But I say, I am here, I am home, I am arrived. And I had that mantra. Because sometimes, and I just did that, and all of my lights in my office just blinked.
yeah,
So
I noticed that. Yeah.
they didn't blink before, and now they're blinking. And why I say that is people, like, they think of it as the afterlife. They try to wait for that place of awareness. And I always say that we're not here to just create heaven on earth, but we are literally a part of heaven here on this earth. And so we could always come back to home. We're always connected to that. No matter how disconnected, we could always pivot and return. But I think what's important is the concept of identity and how we see ourselves and how we view the home. And for me, this earth is just an experience, but a place that I know on an inner level, home never left me. It's always in the inner doorways of who I am. I'm experiencing this earth, but I'm experiencing this part of my heaven here on this earth, you know?
Beautiful. And especially when I think, for people that do have that fear and haven't really embraced that conversation about death, I think that's what is so valuable to people listening, hearing someone that's done it and getting that reassurance that, yeah, that's not the end. And when you know it's not the end, and when you know this is all an experience that we chose to be here for, this amazing experience that took, all of these light years to create this moment in front of us that we get to experience, that then death becomes more of just the next adventure rather than something to fear. So thank you for giving us that that comforting thought to leave on. And it's been so exciting to talk to you, and I look forward to all the new things that you're coming out with.
Likewise, keep up the great work, and thank you again for having me as an honored guest, and let's continue to generate the faith and the hope past what we're going through and have this as a GPS for everyday lives, this breath of inspiration, the oxygen of our times.
So. Beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find more on my YouTube channel, Moving into Wholeness with Carly, spelled Karly, or on my website, carlywood.love. And I hope that something in this landed for you in a way that supports you on your own journey into wholeness.